Yo, what's going on, everybody? Dave Loughran from Awesemo.com, along with Matt Gajewski. And today we're talking wide receivers, rookies. Now, let me start. That sucked. Hold on. That blew. What's good, everybody? Dave Loughran from Awesemo.com, along with Matt Gajewski. And today we're talking rookie wide receivers. Last video, maybe we can throw a card up there. Rookie running backs. A lot of fun we had breaking all of them down. But today we're going deep into the wide receiver position one by one based on ADP. And I'm looking forward to it, Matt. I think some of these ADPs are a little bit surprising, but once you dig into them, they begin to make a little bit more sense. So let me ask you just straight out of the gate, are you in line with most of the ADPs we're seeing, give or take a few spots? Or do you think some of these guys are going massively overvalued or overlooked?
For the most part, I'm in line with ADP. I think I'm a little bit lower in most spots, but there's not very many drastic differences for me. It's just a little bit under market compared to some of these receivers. And I do think they're slightly elevated, partially because what we saw to some rookies last year, like Justin Jefferson, those are anomaly seasons. So I would say I'm just a little bit below market.
Let's dive into it straight right away, obviously, with Ja'Marr Chase. ADP of 43. Wide receiver 21. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see his ADP. You'll see his where he's going at his position and the overall rank that we have him at over at Awesemo. As you can see, 56 at Awesemo for the consensus rankings. It's a weird situation in Cincinnati, Matt, because Joe Burrow, through the 10 games he played last year, was chucking the ball a ton. The offensive line wasn't great. The defense was awful. Joe Mixon was hurt, and they were forced to get the ball out often. But while you look at this and say maybe there's too many mouths to feed, what interests me is that AJ Green was a 100-target guy last year as well, and now he's in Arizona. Ja'Marr Chase is an NFL-ready quarterback. How does he factor into this offense coming into a team with a wide receiver core that has a quality option in Tyler Boyd, but also a second-round receiver who was on pace for a huge season before Burrow hit the shelf?
And I don't necessarily know if that's a bad thing. This offense should be explosive, and I think these receivers can help each other to some degree. It maybe makes it a little hard to predict the individual game when these guys will go off, but I think the team is going to move the ball overall. Zach Taylor has another year going to implement his system. They run up-tempo. They're going to pass a ton, and those weapons should help them. As far as Ja'Marr Chase, he might be the best wide receiver prospect we've seen since like an Amari Cooper or somebody like that. He outperformed Justin Jefferson in that LSU offense, and now he's going to this explosive Cincinnati offense.
Yeah, I think ultimately, when you look at this team, is there enough football to go around, assuming that Joe Mixon's healthy? What I want to know is, will the defense and the offensive line kind of cater to this passing game in the sense that, can the offensive line be improved? Remember, they drafted Ja'Marr Chase instead of drafting a top offensive lineman, which a lot of people were not particularly happy about. I get it. The skill position's exciting. Everyone loves when you do that. But is it the best thing for this team to have now taken a wide receiver in the first round and last year taken a wide receiver in the first pick of the second round? And Matt, will the defense still be, let's say, less than adequate to the point where they're forced to throw the football?
I think so. They didn't invest a ton on the defensive side of the ball, at least early in their draft. In the second round, they took Jackson Carman, so they did address the offensive line, at least to some degree there. He played for Clemson. He'll, I think, immediately start at one of the guard spots. He was a little bit short in the arms to play tackle in the NFL, but they still have Jonah Williams, former first-round pick there. And the defense, I don't think they made a ton of improvements, which should cater to us for fantasy football. If they're giving up a lot of points, they should have to throw the ball here to keep up.
So as it stands right now, would you rather grab Ja'Marr Chase at his ADP, or would you rather look towards a T. Higgins, maybe a Tyler Boyd going a lot further down in the draft? Or are you perfectly fine getting any of them, and in best ball getting some stacks of this team, maybe a Chase Higgins, Chase Boyd, Higgins Boyd with Joe Burrow?
I do think we're seeing Ja'Marr Chase come off the board a little bit early. And like you mentioned, you can get T. Higgins a little bit later. And if you're stacking someone like Joe Burrow and you miss on them both, Tyler Boyd's a really nice consolation prize. And I'm honestly fine getting any of them. As far as where Chase is going in ADP, he's directly ahead of T. Higgins, but there's also receivers like Adam Thielen, who I'm comfortable with in that range. DJ Moore is right around there too. I would rather take the proven commodities in Thielen and DJ Moore over Ja'Marr Chase and then try to wait to get one of the proven Cincinnati assets.
All right, let's talk about Devonta Smith. One of only 3 receivers to ever win the Heisman Trophy, coming in as the 10th overall draft pick by the Philadelphia Eagles. They desperately needed a wide receiver. They botched the pick a couple of years ago going JJ Arcega-Whiteside. They could have had, my God, they could have had DK Metcalf. They could have had Terry McLaurin. I won't say, there's a couple of other ones where you're like, yeah, but no one was looking at them there, but you get the point. I mean, just a lot of good receivers. And then last year, instead of Justin Jefferson, hell, even instead of a T. Higgins, they go with Jalen Reagor, and the jury is still out on him, understandably so. Even Claypool went after Jalen Reagor by a lot. The jury's still out, but they drafted a first-round receiver this year, 10th overall, because they desperately needed to get some type of potency at this receiver core, which had a top receiver of 600 yards last year, and his name was Travis Fulgham. So you understand where we're going with. But he's since injured himself at the beginning of training camp. He's week to week with a knee injury. And now what type of situation are we looking at where he's going to miss a lot of camp coming into his rookie season where he hasn't played a snap at the NFL level yet?
Yeah, it's a really tough situation for Devonta Smith. Missing all training camp is not going to be good. We can just look to what happened to Jalen Reagor last year. Right. Well, I think when healthy was serviceable, at least. Hopefully he can take a step forward. But anytime you're missing these crucial reps to begin your career, it's not good, especially for your rookie season. Then there's a couple other concerns. They're obviously changing coaching staff. So Nick Sirianni comes in. He's notorious for running wide receiver rotations with the Colts. You really didn't see anybody above 70% of the snaps, and that was with an all-pro like T.Y. Hilton for years. And he's also a coach that runs double tight end at one of the highest rates in the NFL. And the Eagles notoriously did not let Zach Ertz go. So I think we'll see a lot of Goddard, a lot of Ertz at the same time. How does that affect Reagor and Fulgham and Devonta Smith? I'm not sure we see a receiver over 70% of the snaps.
Wow. All season?
Devonta Smith is going to start out cold because of this injury, but there's a chance that he develops. I'm not sure when, but this is going to be hard for him not getting these snaps to begin the year.
So do you think he's significantly overvalued right now in terms of a 75 ADP, 38th receiver off the board?
Right now I do. And if you want to compare him to the next guy we talk about, Jaylen Waddle, who's coming off the board 20 picks later, I would much rather wait those 20 picks and get Waddle.
Okay, so let's talk about Jaylen Waddle then. ADP of 92, 47th receiver coming off the board. This is interesting to me for a couple of reasons. Now, here's the thing. Devonta Parker is someone who has a history of injuries. Over the last couple of years, it hasn't been as bad, and I think injury proneness is kind of overblown to a large extent. Will Fuller suspended the first game, but he has also been someone that is, again, prone to injuries. Take that for what it's worth, right? Who knows? He could be completely healthy, and it wouldn't be a huge surprise. But Jaylen Waddle in this offense, I'm actually a little bit surprised to hear you say that, and I'm super curious to hear why you think that is when you have Mike Gesicki, you have Will Fuller, assuming him, and then you have Devonta Parker, assuming those guys are healthy. And then you have Tua Tagovailoa, who in his rookie season was pedestrian at best. What do you see about Waddle here outside of just his ADP that makes him worthwhile at 92?
Yeah, you look at the two offenses. I think Miami is a candidate to take a step forward. Philadelphia, I think, could take a step back or remain constant. They're going to Jalen Hurts at quarterback, assuming they can't trade for Deshaun Watson. So you're expecting a run-heavy approach either way. Miami changed their offensive coordinators. They're actually going to have two offensive coordinators in Eric Studesville and George Godsey, who are expected to implement more tempos and motions, things to really help Tua Tagovailoa get the ball into his receivers' hands, create yard after catch opportunities, which really suits their playmakers. You have a gadget guy like Jaylen Waddle, who's probably going to play a lot in the slot with yard after catch potential. Will Fuller's a burner, and you have your big possession receiver in Devonta Parker. Not to mention Mike Gesicki and their tight end rookie draft pick should play a lot in the slot, helping them there. So I think the offense overall will be more explosive, helping Tagovailoa, who didn't have an offseason whatsoever last year.
If you're projecting one of Devonta Smith or Jaylen Waddle to have a bigger statistical year, right? Because obviously a bigger statistical year is only relevant if we're talking about where their ADP is. Would you still put Devonta Smith ahead of him? Or is this a situation where you actually have Jaylen Waddle finishing higher than Devonta Smith and not just where you'd prefer to draft him?
I still have Devonta Smith finishing higher. Before the Devonta Smith injury, I think their ADPs were fair. But now that we have Devonta Smith losing his entire training camp, and I mean, Jaylen Waddle's been functioning as a starter in training camp because they haven't had all their starters. Devonta Parker just came off PUP. So he's been getting more reps than even some of the starters that had previously been with Miami. So I think Devonta Smith is still the player you project higher, but their ADPs are closer in my mind than what they actually are right now.
All right. Now the player that everyone has been waiting for. I swear, dude, the flavor of the week, or maybe even the month at this point, Elijah Moore. I mean, people are clamoring over this guy. You saw the videos of him going around the stadium, getting everybody hyped up. He seems like a very likable dude. And, I think he's endeared himself to many people, particularly in the fantasy space, Matt. He has an ADP of 100. The 50th wide receiver off the board, second round rookie for the New York Jets. We have him at the 134 overall ranking, so definitely below most of what the ADP is and where he's ranked. But to me, it's such a weird spot because, he's going at 100 ahead of Corey Davis, who just signed a 3-year, $37 million deal. We don't know what the relationship with either of them with Zach Wilson's going to look like. We don't know Jamison Crowder's involvement. It appears that Denzel Mims is just buried in the depth chart. But then you have a backfield, which is also massively questionable as well. This whole team is a huge question mark to me right now, which is why I've really been trying to pay attention to the happenings at camp. But do you agree that Elijah Moore should be going here or maybe higher? And would you be drafting him ahead of Corey Davis on the same team?
So right now I have Corey Davis ranked a little bit higher, and this is just taking the certainty with Davis. We've seen him in the NFL for years now, versus Elijah Moore, who's the unproven commodity. With that said, I've been monitoring camp news very closely and slowly bringing up Elijah Moore. As soon as we see him in-game action this preseason, if he blows up and the positive reports continue, I will move him ahead of Corey Davis, because with Elijah Moore, I think there is that untapped all-pro upside. With Davis, we know he's a consistent weapon in the NFL, probably not likely to ever be a Pro Bowler. With Elijah Moore, there's still that uncertainty. So if the positive reports continue, I think we can continue to bump him up.
Okay. Would you say right now that Elijah Moore, given his ADP, along with the likes of, say, Higbee, A.J. Dillon, Ronald Jones, Michael Pittman has slipped, Devontae Parker, those are all the players he's going drafted around. But one player going 5 picks after him right now in terms of ADP as the wide receiver 53, sandwiched in between Elijah Moore and Rashod Bateman, who we're going to talk about, are bookending receivers like Parker, and Pittman. But Rashod Bateman is one where it's such a strange scenario to me, because you have Greg Roman, who every year as an offensive coordinator, 8 years, 3 different teams, he has finished bottom 3 in pass play percentage outside of one season with the San Francisco 49ers, where he was like bottom 7, I think it was, right? Bottom 6, it was 26th. I know they talk about running more, taking pressure off Lamar Jackson, making it less predictable. They drafted Rashod Bateman. They drafted Tylan Wallace. You have Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews. They have the capability to do this. And we know that they really don't target their running backs at all. Can Rashod Bateman be that guy finally in Baltimore that actually becomes a legitimate wide receiver 1 for that team?
That's a tough question. And you mentioned,
I ask, Matt.
Yeah, you mentioned Greg Roman. So even if we expect this team to pass more, they've been the run heaviest team in the NFL for a couple of years now. How high does their pass rate actually jump? I think we're in lockstep that it's not going to jump that much higher, even if they do start throwing the ball a little bit more. Working in Rashod Bateman's favor right now, Marquise Brown's been out all camp with a hamstring injury. I don't think this matters too much. When Marquise Brown's healthy, he's still going to have a role for this team. He's the only burner they have on the roster. So I think he still plays. And then how are snaps divvied up between Rashod Bateman and Sammy Watkins? This Ravens team uses a ton of 12 personnel. We've seen them use Nick Boyle to complement Mark Andrews. I don't see that going away because of how run heavy they're going to be. So how do they divvy up snaps with the rest of the offense? And then how do they divvy up the pass attempts? Where do they go between these players? I like Rashod Bateman, but I don't foresee him being a wide receiver 1, at least for fantasy purposes. Perhaps in the Ravens offense, but as we know from Marquise Brown, that hasn't exactly been the most valuable either.
I mean, even Marquise Brown is somebody that I drafted as he has an 8th round ADP right now, which just seems, I don't know, kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, and he has the spike week potential. He'll be the guy they use downfield. He creates a lot of separation for them. And I don't think Rashod Bateman comes right in and takes the number 1 spot from him.
Yeah, he might not. But even so, the number 1 spot in Baltimore was already kind of a middling position in terms of volume. So if you bring in other guys, then you start looking at it. We're like, okay, maybe he's still the number 1, but does that mean 5.5 targets per game instead of, yeah, I don't know. You get what I'm saying here. It's just it's a precarious position for all of these pass catchers in Baltimore.
Right. Last year, you and I used to play the game like, okay, Marquise Brown has a 25% target share. So does a guy like, we'll use Tyreek Hill, for example.
Yes.
And then the individual targets between those two were like 6.5 targets per game for Marquise Brown and
Exactly.
like 10.5 for Tyreek Hill. So even a huge target share in Baltimore doesn't necessarily mean that much opportunity.
That's a great point. Well, we've talked about how misleading target share can be. If you have a 20% target share on a team that throws 42 times per game compared to a 25% target share on a team that throws 28 times per game, the guy with the 20% target share is probably, I didn't do the math in my head, but a lower target share on a high passing volume team can be more valuable than a somewhat like a slightly higher target share on a team that throws very little, is what you're saying.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. And that's got to be taken into consideration because not everything on the surface is what it seems, especially when it comes to looking at those target totals. So Matt, let's keep this going. We've got a couple more players to get through, and we're going to rapid fire them. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 guys. We're going to rip through these, and I want your opinion. They're not the flashiest names right now, but all of them are rookie receivers that are in somewhat favorable positions if things break their way, starting with Rondale Moore, the human pinball. I think it was 75% of his yards came after the catch at college. You're a huge college guy. I know you watched a lot of him. Can he carve himself out some type of role in Arizona straight away?
Yeah, I think so. At Purdue, they just couldn't block anybody, so they had to use him around the line of scrimmage. Things working in his favor. We've had Christian Kirk and AJ Green hurt during camp. They'll be back, but at least it gives Rondale Moore the ability to work with the ones in the meantime. And if Cliff Kingsbury runs 4 wide receiver sets at the highest rate in the league, which should get Rondale Moore on the field immediately.
How about Terrace Marshall Jr. for Carolina? Last year, that team supported 4 players with 1,000+ yards from scrimmage. Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, Mike Davis, not McCaffrey, of course, because he was injured. And of course, Curtis Samuel, who was no longer there, took his talents to Washington.
I know, crazy with Teddy Bridgewater at the helm. So they moved to Darnold. I think that's basically a moderate upgrade, if anything. But Terrace Marshall has familiarity with the system already. He played with Joe Brady at LSU, and he's projected to run in the slot, which is where he played last year. And he'll be that big slot. He's about 6'2", 200 pounds. He's played inside and out at LSU, and I think the familiarity with Joe Brady is good for him here. He should be the wide receiver 3 in that offense.
And Amon-Ra St. Brown is in one of those positions where of all rookies, not all of them, I should say, but of most rookies, especially the ones that aren't being talked about much, he is the guy who, if he really were to show up in camp and in the preseason, could take a stranglehold on a decent amount of targets in an offense that lost Matthew Stafford, of course, but also lost Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, and Danny Amendola, where their 1 and 2 receivers currently are Brashad Perriman, who you and I have both said we like him at his ADP, and Tyrell Williams, who had a decent season a couple years back in Oakland. But now, none of these guys are elite guys that are going to command a ton of attention. Could Amon-Ra St. Brown actually be somebody who gets a good amount of work and is going overlooked as a rookie?
He could. He's already working with the first team, playing primarily out of the slot, having a really weird camp. He's been getting in fights with his teammates, but then their head coach, Dan Campbell's been, Dan Campbell, the football guy he is, been very vocal about how he loves the passion and emotion for Amon-Ra St. Brown. But if he's working in the slot with the first team offense, Jared Goff likes to throw the ball underneath. There could be some quiet opportunity for him, and he's coming off the board right around pick 175.
That's a good point. I mean, Cooper Kupp, how much of Cooper Kupp's routes were out of the slot in his over the past couple of years?
I don't have the numbers offhand, but that's where he played a majority of the time.
Right. So I'm not saying Amon-Ra St. Brown is Cooper Kupp, but could he be someone that Jared Goff looks to lean on? It's definitely possible. They do have a pretty good offensive line too, which is one of the things that's working for them. Last one, Matt. This has been a fun one too. A lot of good rookie receivers, but one that never gets talked about at all. I mean, at all. I've heard them from a couple analysts that are kind of digging deep into the bowels of the position, but Kadarius Toney has an ADP of 205. He's the 93rd receiver going off the board this season. Rapid fire concludes with him. What in the world should we be looking at with Kadarius Toney? And should we be factoring Kenny Galladay's another hamstring injury where he's going to be out for several weeks and miss all of training camp, probably the preseason? Should we be factoring that into the ranking for Toney?
I think we should. Toney's crazy. He went off the board in the real NFL draft before Bateman, before Elijah Moore, before Rondale Moore. Yeah. And people aren't talking about him because he's been hurt during minicamp. He actually opened training camp on the COVID-19 I wanted to say playlist, the COVID-19 list. And now he's finally practicing with the offense just in time for Kenny Golladay to get hurt, which should open up some reps with the first team. I don't think he's better than Kenny Golladay, but he is a candidate to beat out someone like Darius Slayton. He's a burner, and he also can operate in the slot, which he did a lot at Florida. And maybe he takes some snaps from Sterling Shepard. Now he's going outside the top 200. I don't think he's going to finish with 1,000 yards or anything, but you're looking at a cheap attachment to a New York Giants offense, and he's a first-round pick. It's not out of the realm of possibility he beats out one of those guys.
And as we like to close out these videos, the wide receiver you like most at their ADP, someone you might be drafting them higher than their ADP, of course, the one you like the least, I won't say hate this time, Matt, it's a strong word, the one you like least, and then you can include all of these guys from rapid fire as well, and the guy that you think is the safest at his ADP as a rookie receiver.
The one I like most at the ADP right now is still Elijah Moore. I think you'll get significant opportunity from him in year one. That offense has made a ton of improvements. On the line, you have 2 back-to-back first-round picks in Becton, Elijah Vera Tucker. Everything has been glowing from Moore. The new quarterback, Zach Wilson, is promising too. And right now, the player I think most overvalued is Devonta Smith. And again, I don't dislike him as a player, but I think this Eagles team is going to be run heavy, running a lot of 12 personnel, and then he's going to miss a la camp with a coach that has a history of wide receiver rotations. I think he's just a little bit too early right now.
Okay. And would you say Elijah Moore is both your favorite and your safest?
Safest is probably Chase.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you think so with Chase at the top?
I think absolutely. High passing volume offense. We know that he's NFL ready. Safe is tough because of his ADP though. And that's kind of the thing. Like, do I think he's safe to have a good season? Yes. Do I think he's safe at that ADP? That becomes a little bit more difficult of a question for me. I don't know if any of them are really safe, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's probably Chase. And if you want to factor in ADP, probably Moore. I think he'll see the most opportunity compared to where he's drafted.
Well, that'll do it for us. Remember to head over to oddshopper.com to get all of your odds. Everything you need as the football season rapidly approaches here. And of course, subscribe to the channel, hit that thumbs up. It's greatly appreciated, and it helps us continue to put out this free content each and every day right here on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. Thanks for watching, everybody.